Hi, this is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV, and we're here today with the latest episode of Legislative Update. With me today are both State Senator Julian and State Rep Sarah Peake. It's great to have both of you. We're kind of like all together again, but apart.
It's great
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah. And I feel like we're in the Brady Bunch doing it.
Yeah, that's right, with little squares. We're looking at each other, our little squares on the screen. And
Right, that's right.
So I know things have been insanely crazy for us all, but especially for everyone who is working on legislation to address the crisis that we're in. Could you just do a quick update of what the most recent events are? What is in progress and what has just passed this week?
Yeah, Julian, should I take a minute to talk about the foreclosure and eviction bill? So the Senate...
Please do.
Yeah, the Senate passed and sent over to the House. And we had a little hiccup yesterday when one recalcitrant member was holding up session, but I expect it to go through today. There's a comprehensive bill to address the issue of foreclosure prevention and eviction prevention. And sort of in a nutshell, it puts everything on hold until 30 days after the declared state of COVID-19 emergency ends. And it provides protection for people because the last thing during a time that they're out of work, maybe waiting what seems like forever or too long for their unemployment benefits to come through, or for those SBA loans or the payroll protection program to come through. The last thing people have to worry about is whether their bank is going to foreclose on them, or if they're renters, if their landlord's going to foreclose on them. It also protects commercial tenants as well. And I know I've received some emails from shop and restaurant owners in the communities that I represent, wondering if they would be protected as well, and they are. So I think it's a good bill. It allows landlords some flexibility to use and spend security deposits and money that they're holding for first and last month's rent now, so that helps them make up for the shortfall in lost rent. And then that all has to be restored once the COVID-19 state of emergency is over. So I'm hopeful we'll get that on the governor's desk later today.
I'm glad to hear commercial is part of it, because here with our small businesses and our high cost of real estate, it isn't just high cost of housing. Commercial real estate is priced extremely high as well, and that's a huge nut for businesses to carry when they can't be open.
Right. And we want to make sure we're doing everything we can so that businesses will still be there to open once this forced slumber, so to speak, is removed.
So that's a big thing. What else is going on this week?
So the Senate passed there's been a lot of attention around liability and liability for healthcare workers. We have done kind of marvelous work in setting up new additional beds for us to respond here. Just in Cape Cod alone, new facilities are opening in Brewster, in Falmouth, and actually at Joint Base Cape Cod, thanks to a great collaborative effort between Cape Cod Healthcare and some state assets. But liability becomes a really big concern as you're setting up essentially what are field hospitals and field step-down places for folks to recover. And so the Senate yesterday passed the Liability Bill to provide those liability protections. We've sent that over to the House. So that's another kind of a crucial piece of this. All of this is happening too through essentially unanimous consent. We're trying to adhere to social distancing ourselves. And so it makes the legislative process is always an interesting one, but doing it in the way that we're doing means that we got to spend a lot of time working with all of our colleagues, because effectively any one colleague, as Sarah mentioned earlier with the evictions bill, any one colleague can basically hold up a bill, and there's 200 members of the legislature. But so we've been able to manage well so far. I think as we get into particularly some of the financial needs, this would typically be the time of year we'd be talking about a budget. Actually, I think the House, you would have filed your amendments, Sarah, on Friday, and you'd be debating it in a week or two. That has been put on hold. Probably one of the most significant things that happened on Beacon Hill this week was the consensus revenue hearing, getting together the two Ways and Means chairs and the head of the Department of Revenue, really get a better sense of what we're going to be looking at from a financial perspective. And all of that is pretty bleak at this moment. Experts estimate that we're going to have a gap in this fiscal year, which ends June 30th, of between $500 million and $750 million. And then for FY21, the fiscal year that starts July 1st, we'll have a deficit of revenue between $4.7 and $6 billion. So out of a $43 billion budget, that's a pretty hefty chunk. We are fortunate that we do have a sizable rainy day account. It's actually the largest it's ever been in Massachusetts history. We're better positioned than a lot of states. There's about $3 billion in the rainy day fund. But still, as we're looking at not only continuing to respond to the public health crisis and the emergency, but then how do we recover? Those are dollars that we're going to need. We need to spend them judiciously. The big unknown is what happens. What sort of true federal stimulus are we going to receive? There's a bunch of federal money that's come in related to the emergency, but that's really the big unknown, and going to create a lot of uncertainty. Unfortunately for the weeks and months ahead.
Well, sorry, because I heard the quarter that just ended at the end of March was actually, pretty normal. But that makes it hard because what I'm hearing is it's the predicting what is happening on the ground now that nobody really knows for sure.
Yeah, and we have some good estimates, right? We know we lose $100 million in meals tax every month, right? That we're in the stay-at-home order. That's also a big deal for our municipalities who rely on local option for meals tax and lodging. This is particularly going to become a bigger challenge, in the summer when that really ramps up. But it's going to be it's something we've never sort of been through before, and there's a lot of uncertainty because this is not an economic downturn caused to a collapse in the markets, but really, we've put the economy essentially into a coma so that we can make sure that we're keeping people safe and we're saving lives.
So what kind of happened this week is that everybody who's looking at revenue, you got together to try and come to some shared sense of what it might look like before you can even start planning a budget.
Right, because that typically happens, and it did happen in January. It's what's called the consensus revenue hearing, and it's where the administration, the House, and the Senate agree on the number, and then the budget is built around that. But because the bottom's fallen out of the revenue, they had to hit the redo button, the restart button, and have a new revenue hearing. Because as Julian alluded to, typically I would be right now on the phone or up in Boston. We'd have a noon deadline for filing budget amendments, and we would be moving forward. And the week after next, the House would take up the budget, and then at the end of May, the Senate would take up the budget. Unlike other things that we are able to get done with unanimous consent, the budget requires debate. We all have local issues that we care about. We all have priorities we care about. Even with a downturn in revenue, a $42 billion budget, even if it's a $37 or $38 billion budget, that's still a lot of money to spend. And as good as communication has been enhanced through this, ironically, I feel sometimes like I have more regular communication with more of my colleagues in the House and with the House leadership team than I do when we're all just sort of walking around the building together, because we're very conscious of the fact that we need to be in touch with each other. Our Cape delegation, we have weekly Zoom meetings where we raise issues and priorities. Julian's involved in Senate caucuses and Senate leadership. I'm involved in House caucuses and House leadership meetings. So there's a great deal of communication. But when the budget comes out, we'll take that up when it is safe for us to be in the building, or when technology allows us to have a virtual but a real debate over the budget. So instead of us doing it the week after next, maybe we're looking at July. Maybe we're looking at August when we can finally do the budget. We'll do 1/12 spending until then, so the government will continue to function and work and support us. And also, to the senator's point, we're sort of waiting to see what's going to come out of Washington, because unlike the federal government, we can't print money, right? They can deficit spend. We can't deficit spend. And boy, we're going to need some serious help from the federal government for a whole host of things.
One of the topics I heard people talking about this week, probably more in Metro West than here, is some questions about the legislation that was passed to support schools going forward. And now some schools are starting to talk about doing layoffs, and there seems to be some push and pull on whether that education money is still going to be there or not. Is that commitment still valid? Is that something that's still up in the air too?
So, I think, yeah.
Go ahead, Julian.
Go ahead, sir. Okay, every, I think as we're building this budget, right, everything's going to be on the table. And actually, I would actually say on the education front, we actually got done earlier this session, a landmark reform to Chapter 70. There's a lot of other big things that we have been working on. A big transportation bill was passed in the House and the Senate. We passed several healthcare bills. We passed a big mental health bill that I spent a lot of time working on. Unclear, right, for the prospects of that legislation, just depending on when we're able to meet. The legislature typically ends our sessions at the end of July, whether or not that's extended. So on the education front, I would argue that, there's actually a lot of, it's a good thing that we got that done. The question is whether or not we're able to fully fund the Chapter 70 investments this fiscal year. It really has been a priority of both the Senate President and the Speaker to do this. So I think we will try. What the legislature has done more immediately, and we may have talked about this last week, so my apologies if I'm going over rehashed topics, but we basically eliminated the MCAS assessment for this year, which I think it is big help. But it's a lot of unknown right now, and we're just going to try our best to share information and to do the people's business as we can do it.
Well, in our last few minutes here, could you give us some sense of what's coming up in the near future? What is on the horizon? What are the next things that you're taking on? What are the next priorities in addressing the crisis?
Yeah, so something not directly related to the legislature, but the delegation talked about communication. We just got off a conference call with Mike Lauf, the CEO of Cape Cod Healthcare. And I think if there's a message that we can put out to your viewers, interestingly, what we're starting to see now, maybe as we're coming on the downward slope of this COVID-19 emergency, is people have been putting off their regular and necessary healthcare, meetings or whatever, going to see their doctor, having regular tests, maybe not feeling so well due to some chronic condition they have, or maybe just not feeling well due to something that has come up, and they're not calling their doctor. They're not calling 911. So, for example, he told us yesterday they had a number of emergency room admissions, none of which were COVID related, but they were people who were very sick because they hadn't been reaching out to their regular healthcare provider. So I would just want to put out there, whoever your healthcare provider is, telemedicine is in place everywhere from Outer Cape Health to Cape Cod Healthcare. Other physicians are doing tremendous amount of separation so that you're not mixing with COVID-19 patients. It's possible to still go and have your tests and your screenings and a consultation with a physician. You can start with a phone call and telemedicine, and then between you and your doctor, you can make the decision whether an office visit is necessary. But the bottom line is people need to take care of themselves, especially now, and you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to your healthcare provider in order to take good care of yourself.
Sarah, that's really well said. And I think we got to ensure, we really have to ensure public health and people's health, not just, related to COVID-19, but also to, the rest of the health challenges and issues. And I have a sense that in this conversation with the head of Cape Cod Healthcare, and just by the way, Cape Cod Healthcare is a remarkable job in preparing for this. We are in much better shape on the Cape and Islands, thanks to a really robust hospital system. Also, the collaboration between, the fact that we have a functional county government that provides a lot of coordination around emergency response, and then our towns are used to working together. Right, we provide mutual aid to one another. We do a lot of collaborative work. That has been an advantage in our response. I think it's why we've been, hopefully able to reach a plateau in the surge right now. And the big challenge going forward is, how are we going to ensure that we continue to keep people safe, And as certain pieces are lifted, and as there's a little more movement, we're going into the time of year where we traditionally see an influx in our population. I certainly don't. I certainly think we will see a very different summer than we usually see, but we will have more people here. And how do we go about doing that in a way that really ensures that we're not putting anyone who's here at further risk, that we're really adhering to really good public health practices, and we're allowing a little bit of activity to happen so that people can keep afloat. And that's going to be a really big challenge, and that's what we're beginning to look towards in the days and weeks ahead.
That's great. Well, we are out of time for this episode, and maybe we can circle around and talk about this conversation again, because I had a lot of us have questions about that. But anyway, this is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV, and with me today for Legislative Update has been State Senator Julian and State Rep Sarah Peake. Thank you guys very much.